Hello, this is Ashee from Crafting with Ashee, and welcome to this card making tutorial. This is the start of a new series on my channel, and it's going to be called One Background Stamp, 5 Different Techniques. And every month I'm going to show you a different technique using this lovely Moody Leaves background stamp, and you can see it's huge. It's the size of my hand. And I think sometimes we see these background stamps and we're overwhelmed by them. We don't really know what to do with them. We stamp them in one colour in the background and then we just leave it like that. So I'm going to show you over the course of the next few months different techniques, and this is the first one where you can see I stamped this stamp set 5 different times in the new in colours, and then I've cut out little panels, and you can see here the new in colours. You've got from the bottom Hydrangea Yew, Peaceful Pine, Golden Glow, Crisp Cantaloupe, and Birdie Blush. So now I've got a piece here of basic white cardstock in my stamping tool, and we're going to start off here and we're going to stamp with some Hydrangea Yew, and I've got it in my stamping tool mainly because it's such a large big background stamp, and we're going to give it a really nice good ink up here and make sure we cover the whole background, and which we should, and then go down, and then I'm going to use my little tool here to make sure I get a really nice impression. And then you can see here I'm going to go back again with my stamp. Now if you see here sometimes that your ink pad, I'm using the wrong end there, that's clever, but if you find here that the ink pad is a bit too thin, you'll see here soon a technique I'll show you how to overcome that. If you find that you're sticking your fingers in the ink when you try to ink with the ink pad, I'll show you a handy dandy trick to stop that. So there we've got our first colour. So now we're going to put our second piece of paper in, and we're going to go for our next colour. So we're going to give them a lovely little clean here, and do that. Make sure it's well and truly cleaned up because you don't want to be any contamination between the different colours. So now we're going to go for Golden Glow, and you can see here if you want to more of an area to stamp, just take your ink pad and turn the lid upside down, and because these ink pads are the new magnetic ones, they will stick to each other and you have a much easier, much thicker ink pad to grasp. So there we go, that's our Golden Glow. I'm not very happy with that, so I'm going to turn it over and start again. Why not? That's why cardstock always has two sides to it. Right, so give that a good press down again, and then we'll see what kind of impression we get. Now this, we're doing this just for one card, but actually from this one set, we're making one card today, but you could actually make 5 different cards with the pieces we create today, so really useful. So there we have Golden Glow. So clean up time again, clean everything up, and then I'm going to go for our next colour, more white, basic white, and I've just cut all these panels of basic white to the same. And now we're going to go for I don't know what colour this is, Crisp Cantaloupe I think, off the top of my head, and ink it up again. Now let me know, do you like background stamps? Do you find them useful, or do they scare you and you find that you find them overwhelming and you're not quite sure how to use them? Let me know, I'd love to know. Are they your favourite, or is there something you avoid? I love background stamps. I tend to always buy all of the background stamps I can. So now we're going to move on to the next colour, which is here is Peaceful Pine, and just going to ink that up. All that lovely deep green, isn't it absolutely gorgeous? Really, really pretty green. I love it. And just give it a bit more of a welly. And maybe for luck, let's give it an extra ink up. Why not? And just give it a bit of a press. There we go. So that's Peaceful Pine. Give everything a nice clean, and then last but not least we're going to go for Burly Blush, which is a very light pink, but a very pretty pink. It's not a dirty pink, it's a beautiful light pink. It really is gorgeous. So I'm going to stamp that there. You might not be able to see it so well on camera, but it definitely is there. You can see something there. Right. And because it's such a large stamp, and I tend to sometimes miss areas because I'm too impatient, that's why I'm going to do a second stamping, just to make sure I caught everything. There we go. So give that a final clean up, and then we're going to cut our panels down to create our card. Now you can cut them to whatever size you wish, depending on how big or how small you want your card base to be. So I'm just going to put this back. That's one thing I always suggest, is put your stamps back in a home before you move on, and that way you won't have any orphaned stampies. So they're all lost stamps. So there we go. Right. So now, as I said, we're going to cut, and you can see here I've got the 5 different stamps, 5 different pieces, and we're going to cut these together. So I'm just going to attach these together using some, some post-it note tape. Now I find after I've started to cut these that 5 sheets is a bit too much for our trimmer, so I cut it down to 3 and 2. So I'm trying to decide how wide I want my pieces to be. So off camera I decided to just cut everything, so you didn't have to watch me fiddling around with that. And I've put everything into sync. So now I'm just going to put together my pieces. And you can see me doing that. Just matching the pattern up. There we go. Just taking my time to get it properly lined up. There we go. And last but not least, this one here. So now we're going to stick all of that down, and if by magic I've done all of that, now you can see my my piece is a little wonky, so I'm going to cut this down using my trimmer so that I have a panel that looks beautiful and doesn't look a bit wonky the way it does now. So I'm just going to do that. Of course, getting sticky stuff everywhere. And then I'm going to cut down on this side. I'm trying not to take too much off the top and bottom so that all the panels stay roughly even. So there we go. So now we are I'm deciding whether I want to put it on a piece of basic white to mat it, and I decide I don't. So I'm going to get our card base in. Well, I'm going to first do some stamping, and we're going to use some different stamps here. We're going to use this one called Opulent Oasis for the sentiment, and we're going to use the sentiment that says here Best Wishes. So I'm going to use my grid paper to try and line that up nicely, and then pick that up with a block. And then I've got some Hydrangea U ink, and we're going to stamp it in this. Trying to make sure everything's as straight as possible. I'm not happy with that, so try again. Yeah, that's better, it'll do. Right, you know what's next? Clean up, roll it up. Right, put that back in its little home. Put that back. And now we're just going to cut this out. And I'm just going to do this freehand with my scissors. At this point I was too tired to be bothered with a trimmer. So I just went for it with my scissors and hoped for the best, and I don't think it came out that badly at all. Right, so fiddling around here, I'm sorry about that. I'm looking for some scraps to mat this on, and I decide I don't have any there, so I look for some somewhere else. Right, this is when I decide that the background is just going to go down the way it is on top of our card base here, which is Hydrangea U. So there's a standard A6 card base, that's an A4 sheet cut in half and then folded in half. And then I'm going to take that piece of basic white that measures 14.35 centimeters by 10. That'll be my insert. And then I went and found off camera a little bit of paper to mat it on, a little bit of foil, and then I put some dimensionals on the back, and there you go. Those are our two cards. You can see the one here is a card base as Hydrangea U, the other is Peaceful Pine. So I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd be grateful if you could give it a big thumbs up, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button. If you wanted more information about the project, the supply list and measurements, it's all in the description box below. So thank you again, and until next time, enjoy being creative. Bye.